Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 5090 November 18, paper 1-1. And we are going to discuss question 1 to 23. This is the first video on this paper. There will be two videos which will discuss this paper in two portions. Start with question 1. Four types of cells found in the leaf of a green plant are listed below. Epidermal cells. So these are the epidermal cells which I have drawn here and here. These are the epidermal cells. Then the guard cells are these ones here. And the guard cells plus this opening is called the stomata. Then we have the palisade mesophyll cells, and then we have the spongy mesophyll cells. Now it says which cells contain chloroplast. Now it's very easy to remember this, is that it's the palisade mesophyll which contain chloroplast, the spongy mesophills that contain chloroplast, and the guard cells that contain chloroplast. So it had to be 2, 3, and 4. So the normal is that palisade mesophyll, spongy mesophyll, and the guard cells have chloroplast. The rest, epidermis is not doesn't have, the lower and the upper epidermis don't have. Cuticle is not a cell. Four types of cell. So cuticle is a non-cellular layer. This is a non-cellular layer. It's just like the lamination you do on your book, the plastic cover that you do on the book. So this is the same thing here. It's the protection. And it's not a cellular, it's just a layer of material which protects it and prevents the invasion by pathogens, disease causing microorganisms. So that is why the answer to this was C, which is 2, 3, and 4. Guard cells, palisade mesophyll, and spongy mesophyll. You know, the palisade mesophills have cells on the outside because the central vacuole is pushing the chloroplast to the outside, which of course make it very, very good, because as light enters, as light crosses this, it immediately strikes a chloroplast. So there's not a lot of resistance to light and a lot of layers through which light has to pass, so the light intensity is not lost. Then coming to question number 2, it says which statements about osmosis are correct? Glucose molecules can move by osmosis. No, osmosis is only of water molecules, never of any other molecule. Molecules pass through a partially permeable membrane. Yes, that is correct, because in non-osmosis there's always a partially permeable membrane. Molecules move down a water potential gradient. Yes, from a high to a lower water potential. That is why the answer is 2 and 3 only. 1 is wrong. Why? Because glucose never moves by osmosis. Glucose will only move by facilitated diffusion through a channel protein. Then coming to question number 3. A seedling is placed with its roots in a solution containing potassium ions. A seedling is placed with its roots in a solution containing potassium ions and left for 48 hours. The relative concentrations of the potassium ions are shown in the table. Concentration of potassium ions in the solution, concentration of potassium ion in the root hair. Start of the experiment after 48 hours. Now in the solution they were 20, and after 48 hours they were 18. And the concentration of potassium ions in the root hair was 15, and after 48 hours in the root hair it was 35. So how did the potassium ions enter the cell? You see, initially it might have been by diffusion, but it can never ever be osmosis. Potassium ions cannot enter by osmosis because only water enters by osmosis. So osmosis was wrong here and here. So A or C would have been correct. Now here, why A is correct? Because there is also active transport and there is also diffusion. Because when it was 20, then concentration of potassium ions in the root hair was 15. So then it must have entered by diffusion initially, and then of course it started to be active transport. So that is why A was correct. But it cannot have been osmosis. Osmosis is not for potassium ions, it's only for water molecules. Now coming to question number 4, enzyme action can be explained by the lock and key hypothesis. You know the lock is always the enzyme and the key is always the substrate. So the key is always the substrate. Please remember that. Now I would say where is the active site and does the substrate act as the lock or the key? So you know the enzyme is this enzyme is the lock and the substrate is the key. So it says here, where is the active site? Active site on enzyme. Yes, it is on the enzyme. Active site on substrate. No, it's not on the substrate. Substrate act as a lock. No, it doesn't act as a lock. Substrate act as a key. Yes, it acts as a key. So that is why the answer was B was correct. Then coming to question number 5. Some organisms live at the bottom of the sea where it is very dark. To synthesize glucose, that means to be able to photosynthesize, they use energy from chemicals, but the light cannot reach the bottom of the sea. So they use energy from chemicals in the very hot water that comes out of volcanoes. What is a distinguishing feature of these organisms? Now, if they are not going to use light, they are not going to be green because it's the chlorophyll pigment which absorbs light. So they do not need to be green because it says at the bottom of the sea it's very dark. And to make glucose, they use chemicals. So it will be chemical energy to chemical energy. So they do not need to be green. So this is question 5. Then coming to question number 6. Which graph shows the effect of temperature on the rate of oxygen released by an aquatic plant when placed in strong light? Oxygen released by an aquatic plant means the photosynthesis is taking place. And here we have on the x-axis we have temperature in all the 4 situations. Here we have rate of oxygen release. It's increasing and then it's decreasing. So you see oxygen is released by the process of photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is an enzyme controlled reaction. So it will increase and then decrease because there will be an optimum. And if you increase the temperature above the optimum, then of course the rate is going to go down. It's just like a normal enzyme controlled reaction. So that is why the answer was A. Question 7, the diagram represents a cross section of part of a leaf. And then it said, how does the oxygen content of the air at X, now that is an air space in between the spongy mesophyll cells. How does the oxygen content of the air at X compare to normal atmospheric air when the leaf is in the light and when it is in the dark? So how does the oxygen content of the air? So in the light, the oxygen content will be higher, and in the dark, it will be lower. Why? Because the oxygen in the dark will be used for respiration. In the dark, the oxygen will be less. Why? Because it will be used for respiration. In the light, why will oxygen be more? Why? Because it's photosynthesizing. So all the cells are producing oxygen. This cell is producing oxygen and all this is entering this airspace. So in the light, there will be a higher concentration of oxygen in the air spaces. So what had they put the arrow to? This arrow was to the air spaces between the spongy mesophyll cells. Of course, it's on the side, but it's actually the air spaces around the spongy mesophyll cells. So in the dark, it will be respiration, so less oxygen. In the light, more photosynthesis as compared to respiration. Rate of photosynthesis will be more than rate of respiration. So of course there will be more oxygen because photosynthesis makes more oxygen. Maybe it makes 1,000 oxygen molecules per unit time and only 10 or 20 of those are respired. So it will still be in excess. And coming on to question number 8, what is the main function of the colon? It absorbs water. So what we have to understand is it doesn't absorb digested food. Colon is the large intestine where water is absorbed. It doesn't get rid of the undigested food. That is the rectum where it is stored, and then the anal sphincter allows it to be passed out of the body. The colon produces enzymes to digest food. No, it's all rubbish. Colon does not produce any enzymes to digest food. In fact, all the digestion and absorption has taken place in the small intestine. Then coming on to question number 9, which foods can be eaten to prevent scurvy, anemia, and rickets? So they've given you all the 3 diseases which are in your syllabus. And how do you prevent scurvy? So you have oranges and lemons. Anemia means iron, so you have red meat. Rickets means a deficiency of calcium and vitamin D, so it's all the milk products. Calcium and vitamin D is present in dairy products, mostly dairy products. So that is why the answer was D. Number 10, a person who has celiac disease has flattened villi in the ileum. Ileum is the small intestine. If a person with celiac disease eats the same quantities and types of food as a disease-free person, they will have lower levels of glucose and amino acids in their hepatic portal vein. Which row explains this? You see, the first box was capillaries do not absorb the glucose molecules. Oh, that's incorrect. Because actually what has happened is that the flattened villi results in the surface area being reduced. So when the surface area is being reduced, so less absorption will take place. But capillaries, if they are absorbed, they will enter. If glucose is absorbed, it will enter the capillary. So this is wrong when you said capillaries do not absorb, because it said in a person with same quantity of food, they will have lower levels of glucose and amino acids in their hepatic portal vein. The capillaries join to form the hepatic portal vein. So how will they not absorb the glucose and the amino acids? So this was a question which was challenging and checked whether you understood the whole absorption and digestion process. Then coming on to question number 11, what is the least likely to increase the transpiration rate in a plant? What will increase the transpiration rate? You have to understand is transpiration rate will not be, it says least likely to increase. If there's increased sunlight, more transpiration. Why is stomata open? If there's increased temperature, more evaporation, more diffusion. If there is increased wind speed, then the water molecules around the leaf are going to be carried away by wind. So increased humidity cannot, in fact, if the humidity is more on the outside and there's less on the inside, so transpiration will stop because the gradient will be finished. Because inside also there are water vapors and outside also water vapors. Humidity means water vapors. So if there is more humidity outside, then transpiration will not increase. So it was least likely to increase the rate of transpiration. Slightly, it's more checking your English skills, not really your biological skills. Then question number 12. The diagram shows part of a tree trunk, a ring of bark, including the phloem, has been removed. So if you remember, if you cut a stem, it says a tree trunk, and then you have the vascular bundles are like this, right? And as you remember, the xylem is on the inside. Now, the xylem is on the inside, so if you cut the outside, which means you cut all this part, so you've cut all that part, so you have removed actually all this part, so only this part is left. You remove this outer part which I have removed. So the diagram shows part of a tree a ring of bark including the phloem has been removed. Tree trunk, ring of bark removed. The tree will eventually die because removing the bark stops the transports of organic nutrients to the roots. You see, xylem will carry the mineral and the water up to the leaves. Oxygen to the roots will not be disturbed. Water to the leaves will not be disturbed because the xylem is intact, but the phloem carries sucrose and amino acids. So mainly the organic nutrients to the roots will not be passed on because phloem, the outer area will contain the phloem, and the phloem contains sucrose and amino acids, and they will not be able to reach to the roots. Question 13. Which of these organs will receive blood from both an artery and a vein? Kidneys will receive, you see, the kidneys receive Only one vessel, which is the renal artery. But it says which of these organs will receive blood from both an artery and a vein? So, not the kidney, not the lungs, but only the liver. Why only the liver? What you have to understand is that the liver receives, number one, from the intestine, the hepatic portal vein, and this is the hepatic portal vein, and this is the yellow is the intestine. So the hepatic portal vein from the intestine also carries blood to the liver, and the aorta gives out a branch which is called the hepatic artery. So there is a hepatic artery which is bringing blood. Hepatic artery arises from A artery, A aorta, and the hepatic artery is bringing blood to the liver. So which of these organs will receive blood from both an artery and a vein? So that is only the liver which receives the hepatic artery and also blood from carried from the intestine by the hepatic portal vein. This is this word that I've written here. This is the hepatic portal vein. And the hepatic portal vein carries blood from the small intestine to the liver. Question 14. The diagram shows a section through the human heart which suggests that blood leaves the heart at different pressures when going to the lungs and to the body. Different pressures, which suggests that blood leaves the heart at different pressure. Now, actually, what are all these? Now, Q, as you all know, is a semilunar valve. R is the left atrium. S is the left ventricle. T is the wall of the left ventricle, a thick wall of the left ventricle. U is the thin wall of the right ventricle, and P is the basically the valves, which is the semilunar valve, which is opening into the pulmonary artery. So this is the pulmonary artery going to the lungs, and this is the aorta, which is coming out here. Now it says which suggests. So wall T is more muscular than U. You see, which suggests that blood leaves the heart at different pressures. You see, the different pressures are exerted by the ventricles. So it is the walls of the ventricles which is deciding the force which it can, with which it can pump the blood to the rest of the body. So we say the wall of the left ventricle has more muscle. It is thicker than the right ventricle, and that is why it is able to pump the blood with a lot of force. Just like you want to throw something far away, so you like the cricket in cricket when he's bowling, well, he needs a lot of muscle power in his arm to throw the ball very very fast and get the batsman out. So wall T is more muscular than wall U. So the answer was D. Then coming to question number 15, the diagram shows chemicals being exchanged between some cells and the blood capillary. Now you know this is the blood capillary, and you can see this is the red blood cell and this is the white blood cell, which is the phagocyte. And you say what could be the identities of P and Q? You know, P is going from the blood into the body cell. These are the body cells. Now P has to be glucose and oxygen. It can't be carbon dioxide. It can't be carbon dioxide. So glucose and oxygen. And what is Q? Q is the one which is in the other direction. From the cells, it is going into the blood. So that has to be carbon dioxide and water. That's it. Otherwise, all of the other stuff is incorrect. Carbon dioxide and maltose is wrong. Alcohol and oxygen is wrong. Oxygen and protein is wrong. In 16, how many molecules of lactic acid will be produced by the breakdown of two molecules of glucose in anaerobic respiration? Well, this is the formula. And you can see there are two molecules of lactic acid, but they said how many molecules will be produced by the breakdown of two molecules of glucose. This is one glucose. So this into 2 will be 2 into 2, so there will be 4. One glucose gives you 2 lactic acid. There's 2 here. So please understand this, that why there will be 4 molecules of 4 molecules of lactic acid. Then coming to question number 17. Question 17. Which process does not require energy from respiration? Converting amino acid into proteins, that is in the syllabus protein synthesis, keeping the maintenance of body temperature, cell division. These are the factors which are the uses of energy in the human body. So diffusion of oxygen in the blood does not require any energy. It is just a normal process by which from molecules move from a high concentration to a low concentration. Then we come on to question number 18. By which route does oxygen pass into the blood? Oxygen passes into the blood from the trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli, and capillaries. So oxygen passes into the blood. So the air enters the trachea, then bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli, and capillaries. Question 19. Which organ excretes most carbon dioxide from the human body? Naturally, it's the lungs because they remove all the carbon dioxide from the body. Question 20. Which structures are all involved in controlling human body temperature? Blood vessels near the skin surface, the hypothalamus, and the skeletal muscles. So it had to be the blood vessels near the skin surface. So you had to narrow down between A and B. But then it said the cerebellum. Cerebellum only controls posture, coordination, and balance. Sweat glands would, of course, be required to work only when you enter this room and this room is very hot. Which structures are all involved in controlling human body temperature? So when you enter a cold room, it's the skeletal muscles shivering, hypothalamus, thermoreceptors, blood vessels near the skin, vasodilation and vasoconstriction. If you enter a hot room, vasodilation. If you enter a cold room, vasoconstriction. So that is why the answer was B. Then coming on to question number 21. What happens to the ciliary muscle and what happens to the lens when the eye focus on a distant object? Well, you know it becomes thinner and the ciliary muscle relaxes and it becomes thinner. And this you need to revise the video on the eye chapter and that should be helpful for you. Question number 22. Which statement about brain structure and function is not correct? The cerebellum controls balance. Yes, cerebellum, posture, coordination, and balance. Cerebrum stores memories. Yes, memories, intelligence, reasoning ability, acquired skills. If you look at the video on this chapter. And the medulla controls heart rate. Yes, heart rate, breathing rate, body temperature. And the hypothalamus controls movement. Now that is a bit of a rubbish. So that is why not correct. You had to see the one which was not correct. Now you have to be careful when you read these questions. Then coming on to question number 23. What is not an example of a simple reflex action? Steering a car to avoid hitting something. Now look at the other ones which are correct. Blinking when sand blows in your eyes. There's a stimulus and then there's a response. Jumping when hearing a loud noise. There's a stimulus and there's a response. Removing your hand from a hot object. You touch something hot, stimulus, response. Steering a car to avoid hitting something. I mean, you're driving and there is something in front of you and you just steer your car to one side to prevent it hitting that object. Well, that is not an example of a simple reflex action. So in all these three, you can see these were all examples of a simple reflex action, while this was not an example, so the answer is D. So this video has covered questions 1 to 23. The rest of the questions will be done in the second video. And thank you for now and best of luck in your exams.